Very good. Well, good morning. I'm glad to be here with Eric Lutton today. He's running for uh, Knox County Public Defender. And I've known Eric for a few years. We met through some political connections. And so I'm a member of the Judiciary Committee. And when the interviews came open, I was happy to get to interview my friend, Eric Lutton, from the Public Defender's Office. So, um, just by way of a brief background, I'm sure Eric can introduce himself as well. But he was appointed to an unexpired term in 2019 by Governor Lee. Uh, Successfully navigated a couple of elections in 2020, a primary and the general, and now is running unopposed in this year's election. So, with that, Eric, I've got a list of questions to pepper you with. I feel powerful getting to do that for a change, right? Being the one asking the questions instead of getting peppered. So, um, first, the question is, why are you qualified to be a public defender, and what are your strengths and what are your greatest weaknesses that you have discovered?
So I think I'm uniquely qualified for this office because I've got a tremendous amount of experience in the office. I had a career in private practice prior to joining the public defender's office. I joined the public defender's office in 2013. Um, the way that we're structured, we have sort of what we refer to as line attorneys. So those are the attorneys that are, just going in and doing the day-to-day kind of grind, because it is, I mean, we handle a lot of cases. We've got very heavy caseloads. So I was a line attorney for a few years. We have three team leaders within the public defender's office. Those are kind of like middle management positions. In 2015, I was promoted to be one of those team leaders. So that put me as the direct supervisor for a third of the office. So I got to see it from that perspective as well. I was later again promoted to be the deputy public defender, which put me number two in charge of the office. And that's an office with 28 lawyers and about 65 to 70 staff, sort of depending. It fluctuates a little bit. Um, and then later, when my predecessor retired in the middle of his term, I was appointed to be the public defender by Governor Lee, and then have been in that role since 2019. And so I've got kind of a broad perspective in that I've seen that office from every level. And I think that gives me a unique perspective in how to navigate the challenges, and especially the challenges we've faced over the last couple of years with COVID and having to keep the courts running and deal with the numerous changes to the court system over the last couple of years. I think having that experience of seeing that office and understanding it from every different level really, really was critical in helping to navigate the last few years. In terms of strengths and weaknesses, um, I think I would point to a strength as I'm pretty deliberative. I'm someone that likes to take in a lot of information before I make a decision. I don't jump to conclusions or make rash decisions, but I think I would also classify that as a weakness. I think there's always give and take in just about anything. And so the weakness would be I'm deliberative. I take in a lot of information before I make decisions. And so sometimes that means I'm not making snap judgments, but which means decision-making process can take a little bit longer when you're that way. But I think that ultimately, I think it's in general a strength, though, because I think you're more likely to get to the right decision if you do that, but it does sometimes take a little longer.
It's interesting you say that. I won't get too far in the weeds. This is your day, your hour, my brother. But yeah, there was a well-known judge here in Knox County who said that one time. I was trying to get him to take an action right away, early in a case, and I remember he said, in this particular area, in this particular practice, what we do quickly, we often do poorly, and that stuck with me all these years. So I can appreciate that. Um, what have you found to be sort of the most effective methods that you've implemented to sort of help improve efficiency in the courts, court procedures, things like that?
It's difficult to point to a single thing. I think if the last couple of years we would have been in more normal times, it might be a little easier to articulate. But I think I think the most effective thing that we've done, though, not just me, but a county as a whole, is as we've faced these challenges of keeping the court system operating when we're under various different Supreme Court orders at different times, myself, along with the other stakeholders, myself, the Sessions Court judges, the criminal court judges, the DA, the clerk, Mike Hammond, would meet. At times, there were times during the pandemic where we were meeting weekly, because we would get different edicts from the Supreme Court that made us adjust what caseload caps looked like, how many people could be in the courtroom, what type of cases could be heard. And so it is not a stretch to say that there were times when we were redesigning the way the court system operates on an almost every other week or every month basis. And so I think the best thing that we did, that I was a part of, but is that we in Knox County, we really put our heads together. And I've spoken to a lot of public defenders across the state, and I can tell you that was not the case in every jurisdiction. And in many jurisdictions, you had judges sort of issuing their edicts, which they have the right to do. But I was really appreciative and grateful that the judges here took a more collaborative approach, because as I mentioned earlier, you know, I do think that I have a perspective from seeing the office from a lot of different angles. And it was being able to sort of communicate and work together to make sure that we were operating in a system that was designed in such a way that we could all be as effective as possible. I think is critical.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting perspective. Taking still, I guess, keeping on a broader approach. You know, we have our questions here to ask. What additional improvements would you recommend for the future of the judicial system, kind of as a whole? But obviously, that's going to, you know, be from your perspective as public defender. What additional improvements do you believe would be appropriate?
So I think that we made some sacrifices during the pandemic. We made some sacrifices in terms of video court, in terms of access to clients, and I would classify those things as in terms of access to justice. You know, video court is a real problem from my perspective. You know, if I'm standing in court, you know, somebody has their liberty at stake. You know, they could be looking at a prison sentence and or a jail sentence, and trying to practice law when my client can't lean over and talk to me, and I can't lean over and talk to my client because they're at a facility 15 miles away, has been, just to say that it's been a challenge would be a vast understatement. What I fear is that the courts have found that it is convenient to have individuals remain out at the jail. And so there's a push to try and to continue doing things via video, only for incarcerated individuals, mind you. Now, if you're on bond, it's not going to be sufficient to get on Zoom or Teams if you're on bond. If you're an inmate, though, somehow your liberty or somehow your rights seem somewhat lessened in the sense that they want to do those via video. It's just, it is so difficult to practice law when you don't have access to your client right there handy. And we can't be as effective. And studies have shown that outcomes are worse when things are done via video. And so this movement of convenience to try and want to continue to do things via video, I think is a real problem, and something that concerns me greatly about where the court system may be going. And so that's something that I'm putting a lot of work into, and I would very much like to get back to doing things in person, because I think that it's critical that we do that if we want to have a justice system instead of a processing system.
Mm-hmm. And just, I'll tell you, Eric, just as an individual, I'd like to talk to you more about that. I'd be curious to hear other perspectives in that way. That's something that I haven't thought about. Certainly, coming from your perspective, I do something very different. So, and maybe this is sort of related to the next question. But the next question is, what is the biggest challenge you see facing the court?
I think it's that. I think right now, I think it's video court. I think getting people back in person, I think is the direction we need to go. I think I've got a minority viewpoint on that. But again, it's sort of difficult to understand what it is that we do unless you've done it. And I think that, you know, even things like at an arraignment, which seems like a pretty quick and easy procedure. You know, 99% of the time you're walking up and you're waiving the formal reading of the indictment, you're reserving entry of a plea until a later date. What I think that a lot of times gets lost in the shuffle, though, is there's so much work that's being done away from that podium that other stakeholders may not see. You know, the conversations, when you're starting to develop that relationship with the client. When you're a public defender, you face challenges that members of the private bar don't face. And I can say that intelligently because I was in private practice and I saw what that was like. And I've seen what it's like in the public defense world. When you are in private practice and someone picks up a criminal charge and they go and, they meet with 4 or 5 attorneys and they pick out the one that they think they're the best fit for. And then they show up in court together. They've already built a relationship. And that person had a say in who they got. I think when you're a public defender, there's a perception, one, that you're not going to try as hard for the client, which I would strongly push back against. I mean, I believe we've got a really great office with a lot of great lawyers that try their absolute best. But that client is uneasy when you're first meeting with them. They don't know whether they can trust you or not. And so to then remove them where you can't even have an actual in-person conversation, but that you're supposed to call them on a jail phone and review what they're charged with and the type of time that they could be looking at, I think is really problematic. It puts us on the wrong foot right off the bat getting started. And there are things like, sometimes you've got friends or family that are in the audience that you can go talk to your client and find out that they're out there. You can talk to them. You can go out and talk to the friends or family. You can start to create kind of a network of support. And study after study has shown that when individuals that are incarcerated have support in the community, they are far less likely to reoffend. So it may be convenient to not bring the people to court, but by cutting off those community ties, I would suggest that we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And I would also say that when you talk about convenience in video court, another thing that's lost in the shuffle is when those individuals are not brought to the courthouse where we can see them in person, it's increasing the trips that we're having to make to the jail. And so you're not putting a bunch of people on a bus that you can transport a bunch of individuals all at once that we can have an in-person conversation with them. Instead, the attorney is leaving court and having to make additional trips out to the jail. It's a problem.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, turning, I guess, a little bit the focus from the bad, who are your judicial role models and why?
I think I would say former Supreme Court Justice Penny White. There's a lot that, there are several things that Penny and I would disagree on, but one thing that's always going to stick out in my mind, when I was in law school, I went to law school to be a prosecutor. I worked in a prosecutor's office in undergrad. I worked in the prosecutor's office when I was in law school, and I thought that was my path. And all through law school, Professor White kept telling me, you are not a prosecutor, you're a public defender, you just haven't figured it out yet. And she apparently knew me better than I knew myself because she was right. And so I always remember that. She always was trying to steer me and guide me into this kind of work. And I was incredibly reluctant. And so I'd have to say Penny White.
Fascinating. That is fascinating. Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, Eric, you've got 1 minute for a closing statement as to why, even as an unopposed candidate, why we should vote for you as public defender.
I would just say I think experience does matter, and I think experience matters a lot in this role. The Knox County Public Defender's Community Law Office is by far the largest criminal defense firm in Knox County, with 28 lawyers handling typically around 10,000 cases a year. And so having someone at the helm who's had experience in the office and has seen the office from a lot of different perspectives, I think is really important to make sure that we are functioning efficiently and effectively. And I think I can bring that with the experience that I have.
Very good. Very good. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to do this for the KBA's Judiciary Committee. Appreciate you giving us your thoughts on these things, and obviously very thoughtful your responses, and so we do appreciate that.